Greetings. My name is Henry Epps, and I'm the founder of the Second Chance Connections Incorporated here in Memphis, Tennessee. Second Chance Connections is a nonprofit organization designed to help young men and women at risk that live in our communities with jobs, employment, social work, counseling, education, and Christian, I say Christian teachings. So, why did I start Second Chance Connections Incorporated, and what's the purpose behind it? A little bit about my story. I grew up in Syracuse, New York. We grew up poor. Me and my six brothers and sisters, in upstate New York. And this is back in the '60s, and really was a lot of poverty because a lot of people have lost their job with the steel mills and everything. So we grew up poor, but we had a strong mother who taught us Christian values and who loved us. And when I became a teenager, I became involved with some ex-felons, these young men who have just got out of prison at Attica Prison in upstate New York, and I started hanging around with them when I was 14 years old. And so these men was very angry. They were very anti-sociable. They was anti-society. And I had a lot of anger growing up in a single-parent home, and I guess had to fight in the streets and stuff, and kind of just build up a lot of anger inside myself. And so I was very angry young man, and I just felt like I just felt like the world hated me. I remember, back in the '60s, young men getting killed by police and everything, and I just remember just a dark time for me as a young black man growing up in America. So when I was 16 years old, the police pulled me over, and they talked to me, and they took me down to the police precinct, and they said, young man, and I was 16 at the time, that if these guys you're with commit a crime and you're with them, you're going to get charged the same exact charge, even if you didn't commit the crime yourself. And so when I went back home that night, I was so distraught because I never thought about these grown men that I was hanging with, these felons, that if they committed a crime, I would have to serve with them on that same charge. I didn't feel it was fair. And I didn't feel like it was right, but I knew that I had to make a decision for myself. So I went home and I thought about it, and I thought about how my mother raised us up, poor and struggling, and how she did everything she could to provide for us. And I just could not see myself going to jail for somebody else. So I went to school the next day and I saw the Army recruiter. And at that time I was 16, and to join the Army you had to be 17. So I talked to the Army, Sergeant Armistead, and I said, how do you join the Army? He said, well, you have to be 17, and you have to pass the physical, and you have to, pass the test, and then you have to get permission from your mother, or, your mother had to sign your paperwork. So I took the test, took the physical, and I asked my mom, I want to, join the Army, Mommy. I told my mother I want to join the Army. I didn't want to be in upstate New York, or I didn't want to be there in New York State no more. I wanted to get a chance to go and live my life doing something else. So my mother, this is right after the Vietnam War. She didn't want me to go in the military. She wanted her children to serve in the military. So she just kind of just said she didn't want to sign it. So I called the police officer. They come to my house and talked to my mother, and I called Sergeant Armstead to talk to her. And the police officer said this to my mother. He said, ma'am, your son is hanging with these older guys, and they're very violent men. They're felons, and that he is trying to get a chance to find a life for himself, that he could be a good citizen and not have to be around these fellas. And the police officer told my mother that they think you should sign this paperwork so your son could go into the Army. So mom, reluctantly, she signed the paperwork, and I graduated from high school at the age of 17 and went to the Army. I joined the Army as an infantryman. During my Army career, I served as a rifleman, a machine gunner, team leader, squad leader, platoon sergeant, platoon leader, first sergeant, Army recruiter, drill sergeant, and Army infantry instructor at Fort Benning, Georgia. My last assignment in the Army was an Army operations non-commissioned officer at Killeen, Texas, in 15 Cav. So when I retired Army in 1996, 97, the Lord called me to the ministry. Now, prior to the Lord touching my heart, I felt like as a serviceman, I was committed to serving my country, but I wasn't really aware of all the things that was going on in our society and in our communities. Because during the Army, you're traveling, you really try to stay alive, and then you try to do whatever your service leaders are telling you. But once I retired and got back into the civilian life, and the guy that called me to the ministry, he opened my heart to what is going on around me. And so over the years, I started ministries. I worked in ministries in different churches. And when I came here to Memphis about 16 years ago, I just seen so many problems, gang warfare, poverty, and it just so much going on. And I felt that I need to do something. I need to help people. I need to do something more with my life than just working a job and going home and take care of my own personal life. So when I married my wife Vera, we became foster parents in 2006 because we wanted to help some people in the community, and then we started working in the church, working in outreach ministries. And as a foster parent, I just seemed like I did not know so many things were going on here in Memphis. And I just felt like that wasn't enough. So I became a child service officer for the Department of Children's Services. And I worked in a halfway house in Jackson, Tennessee. I was working with young men that was in the prisons, and they were stepping down from the juvenile systems, going back into the communities. And in the halfway house, I talked to them about life and about decisions and how to make better decisions. And so I felt like that wasn't enough neither. I felt like I still needed to do more. So in 2010, I applied for the Army's Veterans Vocational Rehab Program, which paid for your college and helped you get a college degree so you can start to a new career. And so I attended the Southwest Community College for social work. Then I transferred to the University of Memphis, where I studied for social work under the social work department. And Dr. Blakemore was my director over social work at the time, and he was one of my great influences. Dr. Blakemore talked to me about social issues. He talked to me about the importance of social workers, especially African American men, helping in the community and working, in social work and in the Department of Children's Services. So when I was in University of Memphis, I had a chance for internship with the Department of Children's Services. I finished my internship with the Juvenile Department, and I went to work as a juvenile officer for the Department of Children's Services. I had several children on my caseload, and so as a juvenile officer, we have to do an assessment of the children that come into custody. We have to go back to their homes and do an assessment of the homes and their communities, and then we had to provide these assessments to the courts, the juvenile courts. So the process of a child going into the juvenile system is one. They commit a crime in the community, and then they go to juvenile courts. And then as the courts adjudicate them as a juvenile, and then they would assign them into one of the locked up services like Wilder, which is in Somerville, Tennessee, or Nashville or Knoxville. Or they go to youth villages, or at that time Youth Dimension, or Port Lee. And so because they're in state custody, the state custody case managers or the juvenile case managers work with the state facilities or the lockup facilities to make sure these kids go to school, they get social work, they get counseling, behavioral counseling. And so through their assessment, they'll find out these certain needs that these children with needs so they can return to the population and be integrated to become successful citizens. So during my time as a juvenile officer, I came across this document on the stateoftennessee.gov website called Disproportionate Minority Children in State Custody. And this case study was a research paper done by the University of Tennessee. And in that research, they talked about the denominating factors of children coming into state custody, and the disproportionate number of African American youth or adults coming into state custody. In the state of Tennessee, 62% of the citizens that are locked up in juvenile or in state custody are African American, yet African American are less than 14% of the state population. So what that means that your black child, your black son, the young black male has a greater proportional chance of going in state custody and being locked up as a juvenile or adjudicated as an adult than he has going to college, starting a business, or having a good career, or being successful in our society. So, in essence, in the state of Tennessee and pretty much across America, most young black men have a greater proportion of being locked up or being adjudicated as a juvenile than they have of having a successful careers and enjoying the promises of America and living the American dream. Now, today we're dealing with Black Lives Matter. Some people get upset with the idea of the term Black Lives Matter, but the term is perfect because black lives do matter. African American men are treated as a plague in our society. They're killed by police officers. They kill each other through gang warfare. They live in poverty. They live in very stressful situations. That's why a lot of African American men suffer with PTSD and so many emotional and mental chronic disorders. So while I was working for the state of Tennessee in the juvenile department, I wrote a little research book myself. And in that research book, I did a research of Shelby County. And the 5 predominant factors, which goes back to the disproportionate minority children of blacks and African Americans that are in state custody, is 5 major factors. Poverty is number 1. Poverty is number 1 because when a person doesn't have food or provisions or job in their community, then they do whatever they can to survive. Second is an unjust juvenile justice system and a justice system that does not work for African American men. As a juvenile officer, I remember having 2 young men placed in my custody. They were brothers. And they took a cell phone from a young boy, and I guess it was 2 of them. One was a broken phone, one was a working phone. The father was a pastor, and he went back to that boy and he purchased him a phone. But when the police arrested these young boys, they took them to court, and the judge gave both of these young men 2 felonies. Now here you are, you have 2 young men, 3 felonies, as a matter of fact. And so here it was, these young men, less than 18 years old, have 3 felonies on their records for something they did as juveniles, which was stupid, wasn't right. But now they're marked for the rest of their life as felons. And their father was a pastor. He was so upset. He said, Henry, he said, Brother Epps, how could this judge destroy my children's life? Because these felons will mark them for the rest of their life. And when you look at the juvenile system, we look for case by case. Most African American men have cases where they have one crime with 20 years for an ounce of weed. The justice system is unjust and is skewed against the African American men that live in our society. Next, it was community violence. Gangs are a systematic result of poverty and young men not knowing how to survive or how to go and be productive citizens. When you live in a community of violence, either you're with one group or you're against another group. And people who have not lived in New York or lived in Chicago or Baltimore or Memphis or Los Angeles, they really do not understand the problems that these young people face every single day. That even wearing the wrong color can get you killed. That was one of the problems. The next problem was mental health and emotional health. Many young men and young women suffer from community violence, poverty, poor education systems, substance abuse, and they deal with mental health issues, emotional health issues, that as they get older, it gets worse and worse and worse. And this is one of another problems that they face in the African American community or in the community of at-risk people. 5 is education. A lot of these schools that are in the inner city or in the urban communities lack the tools to give these young people what they need to be successful in our society. All these things are factors, but even more, it's the complacency of the greater population that are not taking effect helping these at-risk people. What's the problems? I don't know. You have thousands and thousands of churches here in the city. You have all types of people who say that they want to help people. You have politicians who say one thing and do another. They make promises that then once they're elected, you don't hear no more from them. I even had one politician when I went to talk about my agency and how I wanted to help the young people. He said, wait another year and then come back to me again. He said, you're not really big enough to help right now. So he said, I'm not. I know there's problems out there, but right now, he said, you just got to figure it out. And so when I went back and I sat and thought about all these things, I started Second Chance Connections. And I wrote all this paperwork back in 2016. But it wasn't until I met Eric Watkins last year, 2 years ago at Full View Missionary Baptist Church that I have a chance to start our clinic here in Whitehaven area of Memphis. Eric Watkins is a true urban evangelist, a true missionary. He does the work that a lot of people do not see. He's the founder of the Red Door Ministries. He feeds children every day. He reaches out to the ministries in the worst populations of Memphis. He brings relevant Christian material to families that are needed. He feeds children every day that get out of school or even during the summer. He helps families any way he can. And when I met Eric, I told him about my ideals, so he gave me a place to set up in New Horizon Apartments, Second Chance Connections, where we do counseling in our social work clinic. He does his work in the Red Door Ministry, and we do our work of counseling in the Red Door, Blue Door. We are stationed and set up in 3636 Queensland Drive, Memphis, Tennessee, at the New Horizon Apartments. We are looking for counselors, social workers, or people to come down here in the community and help us to minister to the several hundred families that live there. Sometimes this task seems so vaunting, but I know there's many people out here that have the same heart and love for people as we do. So my vision is in 2021 to start the Second Chance Connections Youth Development Center. In the Youth Development Center, in my vision, we will have collaborators from the religious communities, government, business communities, and other concerned citizens to work with us to do a great work in the city of Memphis and throughout the nation. In the Youth Development Center, we'll be dealing with 5 major areas. 1, we're going to deal with counseling and mental health, emotional health, well-being. 2nd, we're going to deal with education. We're going to take each young person who comes to our youth center, we're going to do an assessment of them, find out if they need a high school diploma or whatever they need to get them in college or get them a GED or some kind of vocational skill where they can become productive citizens. The next thing we're going to deal with is employment. We're going to have a workforce development director who's going to help every one of these young men coming to our community center to get jobs. 4, we're going to have mentors from throughout the city to come in and mentor these young men at least once to twice a month. And number 5, restorative justice. What does that mean? I believe when you take from the society, you must give back to the society. In our restorative justice program, we're going to deal with restoring our community, painting walls with graffiti, cleaning up dilapidated neighborhoods, feeding poor people, helping the needy. We're going to volunteer and serve our community. That's restorative justice. So that's the goal of Second Chance Connection. And the last part is that we want to set up the Second Chance Christian Life College here in Memphis, where we can bring people from all walks of life into a Christian academy to receive relevant education to make them successful in life. In closing, I'd like to thank everyone who have helped Second Chance Connection. I'd like to thank our board of directors, that is Eric Watkins, John King, Lois Pruitt, Justina Knight, Reverend Warrie Williams, Michael Bingham, Felicia Bingham, and I'd like to thank all of the members that works down at the Red Door Ministries and Blue Door Ministries, all of their work that they do to help us, to help this community. I'd like to thank Pastor Peggs and the Fullview Missionary Baptist Church for their support, Bellevue Baptist Church, and all of the ministries that have helped us in this community. And I especially want to give a thanks out to Commissioner Sawyer for helping us and listening to our story and giving an ear to our ideals of what we want to do to improve our community. I know Black Lives Matter. I know that all people matter. But I know that we must come together as a community, as a family, and to help those who are in need. So I hope that you can help us at Second Chance Connections Incorporated and at the Blue Door, Red Door, and New Horizon Apartments. If not, pray for us. Pray that God helps us and lead us and that we can help as many families as we can. Thank you, and God bless you.